All right, we are up. We are live with Brad Green.
Hello,
Brad
everyone.
Green is the project manager of the Angular team. He works at Google. Oh, here we go. Works at Google and manages the Angular team and internal sales CRM tools. He lives in California with his wife, 2 kids, and 4 chickens.
Yep, chickens are easier than kids.
You can't threaten the kids with making them into dinner, though.
Not really, but they don't give eggs either.
That's true. Be a little worried if they did. All right. Can everybody hear us? All right. Everybody can hear us? And we are good to go. So do you want me to read the questions and then you can just go nuts answering them?
That'd be great. Absolutely.
All right. So the first question is, how many projects at Google are using Angular 2 in production today, and how many are starting to do it?
That's a fine question. So nobody is using Angular 2 in production today, as they should not. Please do not. And it's it's not that we don't think the APIs are stable or good. It's that if something goes wrong, we're not in a position to actually make fixes quickly. We have one project that's about to go live, and I hope to be able to announce that soon. And then we have a couple more that have, about 100 developers on Angular 2. But nothing live yet, and I will let you know on Twitter as soon as we go live.
All right. Next question is, will Angular 2 v2 be released all at once with all its components like server rendering, animations, Angular material, etc.? Or will the core be put out first and other features released as they are ready? Or in other words, what is the release strategy for Angular 2?
Yeah, that's a good question. We are actually going to decouple it, and we're going to go live with core. It will come with a couple nice things, like component router will be available at the same time, so that you can actually have a good end-to-end experience. There will be some material design components that are available at the time of release. We will have more components, things like server-side rendering. Actually, server-side rendering might come in at the same time that we go 1.0. That project is fairly far along. There are other things, and I can talk about some of those things that are a little further out that we're still very excited about, but we didn't want to wait until everything was good before we made the core released. And part of the reason for this is that we actually want there to be many options in the ecosystem. So there are other component development shops going on, and we wanted them to be able to offer, and they may come out ahead of our material design components.
All right. Next question is, how's the new router coming along? Still planned to be solid for the 1.5 release?
Yeah. So the new router is coming along well. It's being used internally at Google, and we're using it on bigger and bigger sets of use cases. And yeah, I think we're tracking fine to come out concurrent with 1.5.
All right. The next question is, we are looking at Angular 2 beta. Are we looking for Angular 2 beta before the end of this year? I have clients who need to know what they should focus on for larger projects. It would be good to get an idea of how close you think the project is to use live.
That's a good question. Okay, so we talked about there's actually several teams here at Google who are developing on it, so we know things work fairly well. What their gaps are, I'll list, there's like 3 things that we want to get done before we call it a great beta. We actually went through what we think are maybe the 30 most common use cases for you developers that you have to have a good experience in before we're going to say go crazy with it. And we went through and rated them in a sort of grade letter system, although we have E between D and F. We're kind of low on a bunch of them, and the big gap for most of these is documentation. And so this is number 1 that we want to fix before we have a beta. The majority of the team is actually focused right now entirely on writing API documentation. We have another group of folks, including some external folks, working on the development guide. We're about 20% done with the API documentation, and our hope is in October to complete that, along with a bunch of the developer guide docs. Step 2 is there's some bits of the APIs that just require a bit of boilerplate, and we want to get rid of that before we call this beta. So we have been meeting with a bunch of developer groups, running hackathons to uncover in real life situations what people find hard to learn, or just this kind of feels icky in the code when we do it. And then the last thing that we want to get done is just another round of making sure the end-to-end tool chain works. And so things like that I have a good experience with my module loader and my build system, and if I use a transpiler, that can all work seamlessly, whether I go for ES6 or TypeScript or Dart or even something else.
All right, I have a quick follow-on question to this one, and that is, are any of these things that people can help with, like the docs, for example?
Absolutely, yes. We have, actually, if folks have already been working on Angular 2 and feel fairly comfortable with it, we actually have several open slots for writing developer guide sections, and I would really welcome you. You can reach out to me on Twitter, Bradley Green, BradleyGreen, and I'd love to take your help on it. That'd be great.
I'm going to type that into the chat real quick. That way people can find it easily. All right. The next question is, when would you suggest that devs start using Angular 2 for production apps?
After we label it beta. I know that's a coy answer, but I mean, you guys can kind of track, and I'm going to be very upfront about where we are on the documentation, removing boilerplates, and any other bits before beta. We'll give another solid update at Angular Connect. And I don't want to announce a date, but I do want to be really transparent on just what's left so you can gauge for yourself how it's tracking.
All right. Is Angular 2 shaping up to be what you and the team expected and hoped? How much has it changed over the last year?
Oh, yeah. We've changed it many times over the last year. And I think it's actually gone way beyond our expectations in a couple different ways. So one is performance, and we beat all of our own internal expectations of what we'd be able to achieve in just the raw out-of-the-box performance. And we've got a bunch of things coming down the pipe where we think we can make a bunch of the particular use cases even better. One of the things we did, and I talked about this at a couple different conferences, but in Angular 1, we're tightly coupled with the DOM and our ability to render things. And we've fully decoupled this in Angular 2. What this has allowed us to do is build other renderers. And by other renderers, I mean the ability to render on the server where there's actually not a DOM available, so that we can have a very fast initial load. And this is critical for mobile web. The second is we've been able to render outside the main thread inside a web worker. And we've demoed that at one of our meetups recently. We'll show it again at Angular Connect. And so that we can keep our apps very responsive by moving most of Angular and all of your code into a separate processor using web workers. Last thing that we've been doing in this area, again, these are some future things that are still coming outside of that, the core raw performance improvements. In Angular 1, we have this compiler that looks at the template that you write directives in, and it turns it into a more executable format. In Angular 1, it's sort of this continuous, always-on process. In Angular 2, part of the speed up we got was by moving that compile step to the front, and so you only pay it at startup cost. This is good. We're moving it even further out. We have, I'll call it in the lab, but we're probably landing it very soon, where we can move that compile step to a build step. And so it actually never happens in the browser. And we'll actually be able to not only improve that startup speed dramatically, but we drop the entire compiler from Angular 2. This is something that's coming. And right now, I think it's about 40% of the total size of Angular 2. So we'll get faster two ways. One is just the smaller amount of JavaScript we load. And second is we're actually dramatically improving that initial rendering cost by not even doing the compile on the client.
All right. The next question is, what has your experience been, or experience with TypeScript been? Do you recommend that Angular 2 projects use TypeScript?
Yeah, it's funny if you've if you've tracked our project, we somewhere in 2014 we invented a language that we called AdScript, which is not really a language; it's an extension to JavaScript. And we took on saying, hey, we love ES6, we love all the features, classes, and the safety of let versus var. That we like the standards of hopefully a standardized module system soon, but promises and a bunch of the other bits that it provides. And then on top of that, we wanted to have types like TypeScript provides and annotations. And so for types and annotations, we ended up partnering with the Microsoft TypeScript team on using the decorator's proposal to do code metadata annotation and using their types. And we agreed with them that we would not do AdScript. And instead, these very smart folks could take this effort forward. Originally on the Angular team, we had a bunch of Java developers that really weren't happy with the constraints that we have in types in Java, because a lot of times we ended up feeling like we had to satisfy the compiler, just doing kind of weird things to make the compiler happy, rather than adding any information that would make our lives as a developer easier. And TypeScript is very different. And what we found is that some of even our members of our core team have said, look, I can actually get my way around the code base much easier, and I understand it way better because I have these types to help me navigate, understand what the return types are, and understand the relationships between parts of my code in ways that we just didn't have that metadata information about the code. And so our experience has been very positive in that regard. It also solved a problem for us because there are some teams at Google who love Dart very much, and they wanted us to build a version for Angular, and we did. It was a separate team. We ended up having these two teams, and now we've single sourced all of that development in TypeScript. It's been great. It's been a really good experience where we can actually generate multiple different language versions out of one single core TypeScript code base. Now, would I recommend this for other folks? I think it depends, maybe on the size of your team, and what your view on this is. If you are of the Lisp scheme variety and I just want to do meta programming all the time, maybe like doing a lot of types is not for you. If you're more of like, I've got this giant enterprise application that I'm going to have a lot of developers and I need to be able to very quickly express what I mean about the contracts between my API surface between different development groups, it's incredibly valuable. It's great for everyone just in code navigation. And my recommendation is, even if you're not going to use types, you actually use the TypeScript toolchain and a TypeScript-aware IDE, which is almost all of them. So whether you use Visual Studio, VS Code, WebStorm, Sublime, Atom, like you can get TypeScript code navigation, completion, renaming, all these fun things. Because we, in Angular, we publish this external format, kind of like a header file for JavaScript that expresses what are all the types. And so you'll get a lot of the benefits of the increased IDE abilities when you relate to Angular code, even if you're not typing any types yourself.
All right. There's all kinds of love in the chat for Angular as well. and a comment saying that it's awesome for Angular 1 as well. So yes. One thing you did mention is Angular Dart, and you've kind of consolidated teams there. So is there not an Angular Dart anymore, or does it just use the TypeScript processes there?
It's so although there is not a specific, well, kind of there is and there isn't. So yes, we actually do generate a specific version in Dart language. And we actually spend a lot of time making sure that we're generating idiomatic Dart so that when you debug it in Dartium, it looks good to you. Now, we're not quite there, and I think there's some more work we really want to do. I think there is one problem still that we'd like to solve, maybe, which is if you're a contributor to the Angular 2 code base, you actually have to understand both TypeScript and Dart. And I think where we want to go with this is to allow people who love TypeScript to contribute solely in TypeScript, and we on the core team would fix things up and do all the Dart bits. And so maybe you check into a branch like works in TypeScript. Similarly, for folks in Dart who, like, you could submit to a works in Dart code branch, and then we in the core team would fix things up. We're not quite ready for that, but that's my hope of something we could tackle next year.
Nice. All right, the next question. For each Google team transitioning to Angular 2, can they keep notes on what's worked well and what didn't? Gotchas, pro tips, low-hanging fruit, etc.
Yeah, and this is one of the things that we're trying to actually put into the documentation in a big way. And we're working with some of the folks who have a lot of experience, like John Papa, who is, wrote the Angular 1 style guide. And he and Ward Bell and a bunch of other good folks are helping us make sure that we capture a bunch of these experiences that will ensure people have a good time out of the box. We're also looking at a set of tooling that will, like, once we've solidified on a bunch of these best practices, that we can put this into tools that help send you warnings or give you information either in a browser or in your command line development tools that tell you when things might be off rails or things that you should check.
All right, the next question is, I see there's a focus on writing the documentation. What exactly do you expect to have as far as documentation, quick starts, etc.?
Yeah. We so core team's working on the all of the public APIs. We have this, like, very crappy thing on Angular.io that says API preview. Don't even go there. But I think maybe next week you could start going there and seeing a lot of these very, very much updated API docs that will all have a very terse, clear sentence that explains what this is for, why you'd want to use it, and example code that shows it in action so you get the syntax right. On the other side, we're working on a set of concept guides or developer guides. And there's two flavors there. One is, like, very, very purely concepts to say things like, well, Angular templates, how do I grok what they are? How do I understand the template syntax, microsyntax within it, all of that good stuff? Or, the component router, what is a route, and how do I do it? But then we're also doing a lot of sort of cookbook style examples where, one could say, well, I have this problem, how would I solve it? Like, well, here's a code snippet you could probably start with that matches what you're trying to do. And in those developer guides, we have spec'd out some, like, 30 different sections. Some of them have many subsections. So we're trying to be very, very inclusive of all of the needs of developers in a way that we haven't been able to do in Angular 1. And when we come out for beta, we won't be completely finished. So, there won't be the advanced performance tuning section, or I don't know, like, all the internals of Angular 2 will not be documented at that time. But we're going to have all of those core use cases done. One of the things that we are doing is at the very front of it, there will be, I think the title is currently a section called Angular 2 in 22 minutes, kind of riffing off Dan Wallin's Angular in 60 minutes, but we'll compress it. And then we go more into that. Just the idea behind that is just give you a really clear overview of what all of the pieces of Angular 2 are. And then we have deep dive sections for change detection, templates, dependency injection, all these things.
All right, the next question is the rendering for Angular 2 like React?
Is there any rendering for Angular 2? Is that all it says?
No, is the rendering for Angular 2 like React?
Okay. In some ways it is. In that, in Angular 1, we have a change detection system that can propagate in any direction. And in Angular 2, we do a thing very much like React in that we start at the root node and we propagate changes down. And this is actually great. It helps with debugging in that you can really understand. It becomes a much more predictable system about where changes are going to be coming from. It's always from your parent node. And it actually eliminates some classes of bugs for big apps. So we like it very much. And it's kind of not like React in that, so one of the things React, and actually many other frameworks have these days, is this concept of a virtual DOM, where the thing you as a developer write to is not a real DOM, but something that looks like a DOM structure You update that, and then they diff it against the actual DOM. And it's actually pretty clever because it simplifies a lot of the interactions that folks have to do their updates. We went a slightly different route in that we wanted that to be less expensive, because you end up creating this big string of the DOM and then comparing it against the actual DOM. And we've always been much more focused on the model. And so in Angular 2, we don't look at DOM at all, but since we've already rendered it once, we already have all of the points that we need to update parts of the DOM laid out and indexed. And when you update part of the model, the thing that propagates is only a small change that is either, unroll this ngIf a little bit more or change the property on this. And so there's no diffing to do, and it's a direct call to update a property. And it's actually really advantageous for us when we are in web workers where the pipe is very thin and time to propagate stuff across is important. So the things that have to propagate across the web worker pipe is very small. It's also been good for our investigation into doing native mobile, where we've been working with the React folks on their native mobile solution as a renderer, so React Native as a renderer for Angular 2. And we've also been maybe more heavily investing with the native script folks from Telerik, where we can use either of these rendering engines, but I think we're a little further along with the Telerik folks to build iOS apps with native UIs, Android apps with native UIs.
All right. The next question is, how is progress on the Angular CLI tool coming along, or is it still in the works?
That one is still in the works. It's got, you can actually do stuff with it, but it's very early. I think it's fine for getting started, laying out your project skeleton, but this would also be a place where we would like some help. Igor is going to do a short presentation on this at Angular Connect as part of the keynote, and he's going to lay out the grand vision for the CLI. And what we really want to do with it is eliminate all of the figuring out what I must install to have a good experience, and making all of those very manual tasks shrunk down to a single command that we can rely on in all of our documentation, and that it should take you through all the full tasks of your project.
That just sounds so cool to me.
Hi.
All right.
I think it's a comment.
Cool. I'm on the call. What is the best way to contribute to Angular 2's development?
So we actually have a section in GitHub called, I got to look it up. Hold on. But we have a section where we actually annotate a bunch of the issues as things that we think are appropriate for people who aren't deeply invested in the core or don't have a lot of experience with it. And really what we'd like is for people to, if you're very interested, that you start with these things. It's called community-help is the label. And I am it to you so you can put it in the chat.
Mm-hmm.
And community help it's a list of things we think more novice folks can take on. We would love it for you to gain more experience, and if you're very interested, become a core contributor.
All right. Next question. When will we see a simple testing API like we did for Angular 1 for Jasmine, etc.?
Yeah, this is something that we're also working on. I think documenting is the big gap. There are a couple tooling gaps that we need to fix, and some boilerplatey things that we want to make better. Not too far off. Julie Ralph, who is famous for Protractor and other testing bits, is helping us out with this. This might be another area where we might be able to use help. I'm not sure.
All right. When can we expect 1.5 stable?
We've just started it, so actually we don't know what goes in it. So I don't know when it's going to be stable. That one I don't know, but stay tuned for more info. We're going to have a talk on this at Angular Connect, so you can follow Pete Bacon-Darwin on that one.
So better information in about a month.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Would you recommend a team with people with Jquery knowledge wait until Angular 2 releases to learn Angular?
Well, I think it depends on when you're going to release your app. If you want to release this year, no, you should build on Angular 1. A lot of the concepts are transferable, and we're working really hard to make sure that you can have an easy upgrade experience. If you're going to launch sometime, mid to late next year, then yeah, I think you could safely wait for Angular 2.
All right. Yeah, I think most people are concerned about the transition, and from what I can see, it looks like the transition's going to be pretty simple. So,
yeah. Do we have any questions on that? We could talk about that for a minute.
Yeah, go ahead and comment on that question real quick.
Okay, well, we did do a blog post, maybe most folks have read it, about how we're building a library called ngupgrade that allows you to basically seamlessly nest Angular 1 and Angular 2, merge them together, all that good stuff. There's another effort that's kind of just taking off called ngForward, where we want to make it easy to build Angular 1 style components or Angular 2 style components in Angular 1. We're just going through project definition on that, but again, we'll have another update at Angular Connect on this.
All right, good deal. There is a slight delay between us talking and them seeing it, so we may just get a few more questions about that as we go. All right, the next one is, there's been discussion about mobile features. What kinds of features do you expect to have?
Okay, so at the core in Angular, we've been really focused not only on performance so that you can have a good experience, but also memory. And we've dropped the memory requirements for Angular dramatically. And so part of the reason we're faster is just the fewer number of garbage collection events we have to undertake. And it's actually really critical for these low memory devices where your headroom is smaller and your GCs are going to happen more frequently. And so, and we will continue to look at this, but again, across any other technique that we can look at, Angular performs about twice as light on the memory. So moving beyond core, we've talked about web workers a little bit, and we did this primarily for the mobile use case so that your UI can remain responsive. We have some examples that even on the desktop web workers might be important, but really for mobile, this is really critical so you can have a 60 frames per second scrolling experience or sliding animation experience, even if there's critical stuff going on in the background, processing data, retrieving data from the server, garbage collection, all these things in your app. We talked a little bit about server-side rendering, which again is really great for mobile, particularly on slow connections like 2G, so that you can only send down that first view in HTML and CSS, have it fully render for the user, allow them to start interacting, have Angular in your app being loaded in the background. And once it loads, we replay all of those events the user might have injected to your app, and you can respond appropriately.
All right, hang on. Can everybody? I'm not sure what happened here. My internet connection barfed for a second.
I think I was still live, but I did see you leave. I would guess that they saw me, but let's check. I could replay that.
Apparently, they're just seeing me, and you're prettier than me, so they want to look at you. And yeah, let me just shine it right on you and see if that works. All right. I'm going to go ahead and just ask the next question, and then I'll fiddle with this and see what I can figure out.
Great. We could come back to the mobile question.
Okay. Well, did you get it completely answered?
I think there's a couple other bits. Like we talked a little bit about native UIs with native script. Mm-hmm. We're also, of course, building a suite of components called Material Design, which is part of the Google spec for Material Design, that are intended to work well on desktop, mobile web, and native mobile environments so that you can maintain the same look and feel across all of these.
All right. We had a discussion earlier today about whether we should call it NG2 or A2.
Oh, like when we're shortcutting it?
Yeah.
Yeah. I always type A2, but I'd be happy to do NG2, NG1, NG2. I don't know. Well, maybe we take a vote.
Okay, we can do that. We have a poll right here. I'll go ahead and create that really quickly. The next question is AngularJS versus Angular.
Yeah, so you might have noticed that in Angular 2 we dropped the JS. And we did this because we're now supporting TypeScript and Dart. And we wanted to be fair to everybody, and maybe more languages in the future. Not that we're planning anything, but hey, why not? Maybe we have a Swift version at some point. We wanted to be, so we're developing for multiple languages and multiple platforms. So we're this cross-platform environment with multiple language choices, and we wanted to just not be limited by our initial name, though we still love it. It took a lot of letting our baby go to do that rename, but it's making room for expansion in the future.
All right. So far on the poll, it looks like there are 12 votes for NG2 and no votes for A2 quite yet. So
the people have spoken.
That's right. Yeah. So Angular going forward then, huh?
Yeah. And we wondered, like, would people still find us on the web if they typed Angular? They still do. I think we've replaced Angular Momentum as the top natural search hit for Angular. Sorry, physics.
Yeah, I was going to say, is the speed with which you develop Angular velocity?
Yeah, maybe it is.
Yeah. All right. How much does Protractor need to change to support end-to-end testing in Angular 2?
Not too much, thankfully. And the reason is that we developed this specific API for Protractor to plug into. Originally, it was kind of wired in weird ways, but we have actually a particular testing API that we built in Angular 1, and we just build the same bit in Angular 2. There's a couple things we want to make nicer just for ergonomics, so we can find the elements in a nice way for Angular 2, but the basic Protractor didn't need too much.
All right. It looks like A2 did get a pity vote.
Oh, thanks.
Got one vote. Maybe somebody have an opinion. Anyway, is it difficult to make it to London? Will Angular Connect be live broadcasts? Okay. It's difficult to make it to London. Will Angular Connect be live broadcasted?
Yes, it will. Yes, it will. Yes, it will. Please join us on the live broadcast. You might have to be up in the middle of the night.
I'm always up in the night. Just ask my wife. All right, next question. Can you speak about Angular Tactical Data Access Library? How much focus are you giving it? Does it end up on Angular 2 only library, or is it purposed for 1 and 2?
Tactical. Okay, so for those who haven't heard of it, because we haven't talked about it too much, we're trying to solve a problem of maybe kind of a small space, maybe not, where you already have a backend data store that you have to work with. Maybe it's a lot of us. And you also want to have a very good intermittently connected experience for users where your app is basically always thinks it's offline and it just syncs in data changes from the backend. Now, if you have choice to make, if you're starting anew, you don't have a backend yet, there's lots of options that you could pick that kind of do this already. But if you already have a backend, I already have MySQL, I already have Oracle, I already have whatever on the backend. Like this is designed for that use case where we provide some nice syncing primitives to allow your app to always work in the offline mode, so that if you get disconnected, you're still fine, and then when you get reconnected, there's a way to do the diffs. We are treating this as a research project right now. We don't have a customer using it. If you want to be a customer using it, we would love to get your input to see if you can help us out figuring out whether this is going to work well for you or not. So no, it's not on a particular track.
All right. Looks like NG2 totally slaughtered A2, 25-1. So
I'm going to change my notation. Thanks. Good to know what people want.
All right. I see some features are still missing for things like binding to date fields, etc. How close are you to feature parity with Angular 1? And will there be a matrix of Angular 1 to Angular 2 features?
We're very close in feature parity. Binding to the date field, yep, that's one of them. It's on our list to fix. One of the other things is we want to do, and sometime soon, is if you're in Angular 1 using track by, that's something we don't have in Angular 2. Like that and just a couple other things are feature gaps we want to close. ng aria is something we have to close. The IE10N bits we have to close.
All right. When will we see a stable seed project from the Angular team?
So that we're going to have done for when our documentation is done. So we, I think we're getting close. And the last thing to figure out is figuring out which module loader to use. We want to bet on System.js for aligning with ES6, but we're figuring that out with Guy Bedford and folks. So a couple things to wrap up, and then we'll have something we like. Eventually, that will just be baked into the command line interface, and you won't have to worry about it.
All right, couple of comments here. One of them is kind of a question, so I'll read them and then we'll see where we wind up. But many starters and sometimes they aren't up to date, or the build tools give us trouble. The ng2-play sample is outstanding, easy to use, and uses TypeScript. Ken, can you put a link to that in the chat? And with that, typings are a pain sometimes when they are out of sync. Is there anything to make that better?
Yes. So, this is part of our release infrastructure that we need to make better, and we're going to ensure that they're always in sync.
Okay. All right, the next one, with Angular 2 moving to TypeScript and IDE support for JS/TS improving, is it becoming more of a recommendation to use a full-fledged IDE to edit Angular code? It seems Angular 1 development is commonly done on simpler editors, with the notable exception of WebStorm.
So Angular 2 works just fine on simple editors like Atom, Sublime, or VS Code, and they actually all have this, and Vim also is great. They also all have support for TypeScript. So unless you're using text edit or ed on your command line, I think you're going to have a really good supported experience.
All right. I think somebody was looking for Vim versus Emacs.
Oh, yeah. So Emacs, I don't know anything about that. But yeah, Vim has really good support for most of the stuff, or it will soon.
I write my code in Emacs and it seems to be fine. So just put that out there. All right. What's the future of Dart and Angular Dart? Is Google still using it much or starting new projects with it?
Yeah, we are still starting new projects with it. And we intend to support Dart for as part of Angular 2.
All right. There was a preview on a blog recently about using version 1 and version 2 together. What progress is being made on this front, and is this a focus for the beta release?
Yes. So for beta, we will have the Angular 1, Angular 2 library called ng upgrade working with live examples. And Mishko himself is leading this, making good progress. The status, I think he checked in his code, so you can probably see stuff up there right now in GitHub. But we can currently bootstrap Angular 1 and Angular 2 together. We can't do parameter passing. That's the next phase. And then we'll make sure transclusion works. And then we can show a bunch of end-to-end demos with nesting Angular 1 and Angular 2, dependency injecting services between Angular 1 and Angular 2, doing data binding between ng1 and ng2, all these good things.
Very cool. Do you know of any shims in the works to patch legacy browsers to be able to run Angular 2 apps?
Well, we have done some thinking about what types of browsers we want to support. Actually, we haven't done some thinking. There's a group of folks at a company called Amadeus in Europe who does all the flight reservation backends for Europe called, and they actually have a couple folks around the Angular core team, and they said, you know what, we actually need IE9 support. And they've been working diligently, making all the tests pass. And so it's looking like we're actually going to support all the way back to IE9. IE8, probably a non-starter, but hey, if you think you can make it work, more power to you.
All right. This looks like the last question in the queue. If you have more questions, we still have about 15 minutes scheduled. So just putting that out there if you have more stuff you want to ask. It may not even have to be about Angular, I guess. Anyway, I run the Angular meetup in Orange County, California, and my members would love to hear from a core member about Angular 2. Who can I talk to? And will Google take NG2 on tour in the community?
Yes, we will take on tour in the community. Will we make it to Orange County? I don't know. But with like Angular does, or not, Google does have an office down there in Irvine. And if I make it down there, I will absolutely reach out to you guys and do a talk at your site.
All right. And Shy had to ask, who is your favorite Angular developer, Brad?
Oh, my favorite Angular developer. That's a good question. How do I not
Like
slight
picking your
everybody?
favorite chicken?
I think it's Shy, actually. Oh, no, I have a favorite chicken.
All right. I don't think this was directly asked. Any hopes or dreams for release timeline?
I hope it was released a year ago, but it was not. I hope we can write our documentation very quickly and give you guys a great experience very soon.
All right. Ken asks, who's working on an Angular 2 book? I know ng-book has an alpha book out, and it's a good start.
Yep. They really can't complete until we complete.
Right.
I know of several others. But yeah, the NG book guys, they're really good about keeping things in sync. So it's probably a good bet.
Okay. Any other recommendations?
No, I got out of the book writing business, and
Okay.
nobody's asked me to review one, so I don't really know.
Okay. Do you see use cases where you would recommend something other than Angular for a non-trivial application?
I don't know. I think React is really interesting. I think it comes down to a matter of taste. If you like their templating style, the JSX is very interesting inline style. I think it's very comfortable for developers, particularly if it's a small team and it's just you. We actually like our templates in pure HTML that can be worked on by tools and be worked on by non-developer roles, like people who can edit HTML. Visual designers, interaction designers can work with you when your templates are separate like that.
All right. If you weren't using Angular, what would your next JS framework of choice be?
I think I just answered. I think React is fun to play with. It's good stuff.
All right. Do you think Angular 2 is going to be used for some semi-serious mobile gaming? It seems like combined with graphics and a sound library, it would totally rock. Yes,
please. I've heard of some folks starting work here. Angular 2 is super fast, and be able to run in a web worker. Like there's some stuff we haven't explored because we've decoupled from the UI or from the DOM. We can put other renderers on it, or someone else maybe could put another renderer on it, like WebGL or Canvas or something else even.
All right. Where do you recommend starting if I were to try to read the NG2 source?
I don't have a good answer for that. I would actually try to write some code and maybe debug from my code, build an app, and then watch how the Angular code walks through it.
Oh,
Hey.
sorry about that. I don't know what the deal is with my internet. I'm going to ask the next question, and then I'm just going to copy and paste the next few in.
Okay, good.
And that way you can keep going without me if I disappear again. All right.
Sure.
So the next question is, and I'm sorry, everybody. I don't know what the deal is here, but anyway, what has your work-life balance been during the NG2 effort?
Angular 2 it's mostly a stress in my work-life balance when I travel to conferences and have to prepare for them. It's quite intense preparation, helping everybody else prepare for their talks. And, traveling overseas, the rest of my job, where I manage another 70 developers here at Google working on CRM systems, is actually quite a bit more demanding than Angular is. And I end up traveling to some other sites, including Shanghai, for that.
All right. The next question we have is, can you talk a bit about the benchmarking library? Is it going to be useful to us in our own projects, as we saw at NGConf 2015?
Oh, yes, please. So we built this thing called BenchPress because we really wanted to instrument real apps, macro apps, not micro performance benchmarks like JSPerf does, so that we could see many more properties of it. So like garbage collection events, and we could really get high resolution details. And so we went through the Chrome browser performance APIs to instrument this from the outs. Are we gone again? Hi.
Did you get that? Did you get that one answered?
I don't know.
The benchmarking.
Yes. So yes, it's very good for any web framework. It gives you way more information that you can get, I think, from anything else that benchmarks out there. Please use it on your own projects. The other thing that I'd recommend folks do is go look at the web tracing framework in Chrome. We've instrumented Angular 2 with a whole bunch of these markers so you can see what's going on in Angular 2. We really recommend, and we're doing this with all of our internal projects, we recommend that you instrument your project with the web tracing framework marker so that you could see a version of it that makes sense semantically with what you're trying to do in your app. So you can see your own functions and how much time that they take, rather than the sort of flame chart mishmash of figuring out where the performance problems come from.
All right. I'm going to ask this one last question, and then when you're done answering it, then just go ahead and just tell us a little bit about what to expect coming up with Angular, both Angular 1 and Angular 2. And then cool. If there's anything else you want to tell us about, go for that, and then we'll wrap it up.
Okay.
The last question is, what are your favorite sites or apps built with Angular?
Favorite sites? I use Netflix a lot. I actually use HBO site a lot. And like the Google ones that I use more are things like Google Trends and Google Analytics, written with Angular. And then was there a second part to this question?
Yeah, so what can we expect coming up that maybe we haven't talked about with Angular 2, Angular 1?
Yep. Okay. Yeah, so the thing that we haven't talked too much about is what else is coming for Angular 1. And we actually have 3 big features that we're developing. One is a new IE10N library and way to do localization much more seamlessly if you've got an external localization house. Number 2, we've talked a little bit about Component Router, but this is available in both Angular 1 and Angular 2. And the last bit we've talked not at all about is our new animations library, where we're going to make developing syntax much simpler, much more robust by taking the syntax for it out of CSS and into either external JSON representation file or into just annotation on top of your code in a JavaScript object or in a TypeScript or a decorator's annotation.
can still hear and see you if I disappear. So you can just keep talking.
Oh, I can just keep talking. Good. Okay, well, let's see. Anything to wrap up with? Other stuff in Angular 1. We talked about ng forward, helping to write components that work between Angular, makes it, upgrading easier. And we talked about the CLI. Oh, one last thing. We've had this project that's a Chrome extension called Batarang for a while that has kind of a checkered past where we've had times where it's crashed your app and you had to uninstall it. We have investing in this a bit more, and I will talk more about this at Angular Connect, so please tune in.
All right, sounds great. I'm really sorry, everybody, for my internet. It's obviously it's something that you can't really help, but thank you, Brad, so much for coming and keeping us up to date. And we'll look forward to those announcements at Angular Connect.
Great. Talk to you guys later. Thanks for coming.
Yep. Thanks for coming. All right, it says it's stopping. Stopping. I don't know if you guys can still see this, but anyway, thanks so much, everybody. It failed to stop the broadcast. All right, well, anyway, we'll see you back tomorrow. Same bat time, same bat channel. All of the sessions are up, listed at the top. So you can just click through. You